Hello. Welcome.
Welcome back.
The Trippy Podcast. You are listening to Adelaide and Jim, and we are very excited today because we have an awesome person on. I'm so stoked. This is going to be really great.
You've known her since what, high school?
I don't want to talk about it.
Oh my goodness.
So many years. No, we're going to have a really awesome interview today. So welcome. Glad that you could join us. Let's kick this party off, shall we? All right, doing the thing. So back in 2010, as some of you may know, I got accepted to a master's program in Barcelona, Spain. My then boyfriend and I decided that it would be fun for us to move there together. And we even got married while we were there. But that was truthfully another story for another time. And this isn't about us. This is about LeeAnn Mutchler, who is a girl I had originally met as a junior at Notre Dame de Sion High School in Kansas City. And as I found out after we moved to Barcelona, was an American immigrant who had already been living and working in the city for 3 years. So using her impressive Catalan, her knowledge of our adopted home, and her skills as a wildly entertaining extrovert, we explored parts of the city that we hadn't seen yet. We got to know our old haunts in new ways, and we probably met about a quarter of the population of the city, if I'm being honest. LeeAnn was an unexpected gift during an otherwise stressful, albeit exciting time. LeeAnn would go on to live there for another, I think, 5 years. We'll let her correct me if I'm wrong on that one. But she managed to move back to the States and spent the pandemic landing work as a director of alumni relations for the University of California in San Francisco, and has further ingratiated herself in the area, as I understand, by marrying a local nurse. She is now moving into this new chapter in her life, and we thought this would be a good time to reflect with her on her experience living abroad. So please welcome to the stage the incomparable LeeAnn Mutchler. I've had so much coffee today.
Thank you guys. No, what an intro.
Completely obvious. I'm just going to put this over here.
Let's get that out of reach.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm just thrilled to be here with you guys today and talking about my favorite subject, which is, Barcelona and the expat life, and just encouraging people to take the leap and to do it, because there's just no downside.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to imagine that that's the case, but it really is true. And I mean, was Spain the only time that you have lived abroad, or have you been other places?
I did live abroad in Mexico, and that was really just for a summer exchange program, but it was a very impactful moment in my life. And I would say that it really doubled down on an existing sort of fascination with Spanish. And, believe it or not, I was in, like a little college town, but it was with a small community of exchange students. And I was the youngest one in the program because most of them were in college, and I was still in high school. So I'm not sure if you remember that, but it was between the summer of our junior and senior year at Notre Dame de Sion.
Yes. That's right. I
don't
forgot
remember
about that.
Well, I mean, it was the whole summer. It was 3 months. And I don't know if that can, counts as sort of living abroad, but for me, it was a pretty impactful time at that tender of an age.
Yeah.
Spent 3 full months away from home. And, it was in Jalapa, Veracruz, which is a little colonial town in the state of Veracruz, which is kind of in the middle of that, scooped out part of Mexico on the East Coast.
Oh, that's amazing.
It was up in the mountains. The port town is more popular. Veracruz is more well known, but Jalapa is a darling little colonial town where I think I sort of got the international bug, and that later would shape my life and help me move to Spain.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's amazing.
Sounds cool.
I do remember we had the Mexican exchange student who taught me the lyrics to Macarena, which was really helpful at that stage in my development, especially for my Spanish language. But no,
I think you just dated yourself there.
Very much so. Absolutely.
She was from the Yucatan Peninsula, and she was from a small town on the northern side of the Yucatan Peninsula. And you forgive me, I can't remember her name. She was lovely.
I can't either. She was amazing, though. I absolutely loved hanging out with her.
But it was just like 5 years ago.
I know, right? You would think that we would
Come
have her
on.
name like right on the tip. Yeah, I'll go look at my yearbook later, which I very much still have. But yeah, that was I loved that school, and it was funny because I actually met you. I was a transfer student. I came in from public school and managed to come in as a junior, which was awkward because it's like you just have 2 more years left, and that was the thing. But man, they were influential years, and I met some really, really remarkable women through that school. And learned a lot about myself, which I got to be honest, I don't think I was getting that at the school I was at previously. So this worked out very well.
True.
But like I said, this is not about me. This is about you and this amazing opportunity that you took to go live in Spain. And you lived there for almost a decade.
Yeah, I did. I mean, it was 8 years, but yeah, I mean, it felt
Good.
pretty impactful. And yeah, I mean, thank you for judging it up for the interview. But yeah, 8 years was my time in
I
Spain.
always round up.
And yeah, rounding up is, I definitely think that's, part of the expat trick, right? You live there for 2.5, you say 3, right?
Right. All right. So one of the first things that I wanted to ask you about, because I knew that you could commiserate, and it turned out you did. When I mentioned to people that we lived in Barcelona, we always get, oh, Barcelona. Everyone always wants to call it Barcelona, which is not wrong, but
It's highly annoying.
as people who live in cities with multiple nicknames, like what's a more appropriate way to refer to the city in a nickname?
I mean, quite frankly, I mean, people from Barcelona say Barcelona. They don't do the fe that connotes Castilian Spanish, which if you have ever lived in Catalunya, you would know that basically says that you kowtow to the Catholic kings and the seat of Aragon, and that you were a willing participant in the oppression of the Catalan people and language and culture for hundreds of years. So no, we pronounce it Barcelona. But when I speak to other Catalans, if I happen to, notice, a person speaking Catalan or a person speaking Spanish with a Catalan accent, my first question to them is, it's de Barna, which in Catalan means, are you from Barcelona proper? And, you'll hear oftentimes in Catalunya people say, soc de Barna, meaning like, I'm from the city of Barcelona, but the proper city of Barcelona, as in like, I'm not even from Las Afueras, on the outskirts of Catalunya, which, so people ask me, Barcelona. And I said, no, Barcelona. And then I ask Catalans, it's de Barna, Barna. They always say, yes or no, but I mean,
Yeah.
but they enjoy, I think, the recognition that Barcelona is different.
Yeah.
It's different than the rest of Spain. And it's an immediate sort of way to sort of break that ice that I wasn't just there as a tourist. I lived there. I understand the culture in a very sort of, easy, quotidian, small way.
That's lovely.
Right
though. I mean, even as tourists, I feel like that's an attitude that we could do better to appreciate and embrace, because when you travel to a place, ingratiating yourself with the local population, the local culture, I just feel is like the best way to enjoy your full experience, truthfully. Yeah, I love that.
And especially given how the autonomous regions operate, which I think is a question later on here for you. But
yeah, well, I mean, honestly, we can just jump right into it. I'm kind of curious. How would you describe the Catalan people?
Ooh, layered question.
That's
Start
obvious,
small.
isn't it?
We'll start
Yeah, no,
small and we'll
it's-
get bigger from there. It'll be fine.
Yeah. So, well, first I'll note that my background photo here on our visual portion of the podcast today is Cadaqués, which is one of my favorite coastal towns in the Costa Brava, which is about 2.5 hours north of Barcelona proper. This was a town that was not only, as you can see, gorgeous and, Mediterranean whitewashed, Spanish roofed, town on the beautiful Costa Brava, but also was home to Salvador Dali and Picasso. Both of them had homes within that region, and the Empordà region, and specifically in Port Lligat, which is about 20 minutes north. and close to a gorgeous national park called Cap de Creus. So first and foremost, I will say about Catalunya, it is an amazingly gorgeous place, and it is beyond just the beauty of Barcelona city. Barcelona, the city, is absolutely an architectural marvel dedicated to an insurmountable amount of like nuance and history and architectural dedication. And, truly the people I think of Catalunya are very design dedicated, because they're just living surrounded by so much beauty, and therefore, it has an effect on them whether or not they recognize it or not. So, the Catalan people, I think, they're humble in a lot of ways because, Catalan culture was repressed under, the Catholic kings and then, later by a dictator government for many years. And Francisco Franco and that regime sort of repressed the public use of Catalan as the language and
which is
culturally.
a fairly recent history too. Like I had classmates whose grandparents fought in the Spanish Civil War and in the resistance movement for the Catalan cause.
Yes, and I think that currently the young people might be getting some distance to it, but people that were our age, in our, I won't divulge too much, but anywhere from the ages of sort of late 30s to mid 40s, they were very much constantly reminded of the Spanish Civil War and, the underground bunkers that are in the city. Which, by the way, if you're visiting Barcelona, I highly encourage you to go on a bunker tour and go underneath the guts of the city. Certain portions of the old Gothic quarter don't have them because they are too old, quite frankly. But if you go into a neighborhood where I used to live, like Gracia, there are plenty of bunkers that you can tour where people literally went underground every time there were bombings in the city. Which brings me back to the fact that, there is a humility about the Catalan people that is kind of a plus and a negative. They are, still in sort of medieval mentality in a lot of ways. Like, oh, well, we're our own little thing, just let us be, just let us have our culture. We want to do things the way that we've always done them. Which, in a lot of ways, that's kind of coming full circle in other places in the world. People who are trying to go back to ancient but great ways of farming, not including any GMOs in their food and, making sure that they're preserving biodynamic ways of farming. That's been going on in Catalunya since the beginning of time, and they never changed it. And they never would, because they were not influenced by mass exportation of goods necessarily. They were more focused on preserving their history and their culture. And part of that was making sure that the ham that they were feeding was free range and eating nothing but, the finest quality acorns and chestnuts, so that you get the best pata negra in a 5-region territory or whatever. But so they're humble. And with that, I think from an exterior perspective, as a foreigner coming in, they're protective of their language. They want you to learn it. They want you to understand it. They want you to understand that their culture is different than the rest of Spain. And so, if you come in with assumptions and you come in, asking where the local like flamenco dancing, place is and where the local bullfight ring is, you're going to want to school you. They're going to want to sit you down and say, no, here in Catalunya, we're very different. And, we've outlawed bullfighting.
They turned the bullfighting ring into a library, didn't they?
They did. And yeah, it's a library and shopping center, but
I mean, where you can buy books.
Right. Where you can buy books.
It's gorgeous. It's a shopping center, but it's a shopping center you just want to stand in and look at. I mean,
it is gorgeous. It is gorgeous.
Stunning.
And it has great, again, that great architectural feel. But the inferiority complex in some ways kind of, I think for a lot of people who are just getting to know the Catalan culture, kind of feel a briskness that comes from a history of protectionism. But the Catalan people, once, you are committed to understanding who they are and understanding their culture and making an attempt at speaking a few words in Catalan, you will be welcomed open arms, open heart, and open eyes into their culture. And I had the luxury of making a lot of local friends, but it takes time. It takes time to nurture those friendships and to have that back, because it's also a very transient city. It's very much like Paris and London and, New York.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's full of tourists and there's people who come and go. There's a lot of industry and finance and business and things of that nature. So you have people who are transient for that reason, but you have a lot of tourism and high seasons and low seasons, to be sure.
Yeah. Well, and the universities as well, of course.
Yeah.
One of my favorite films of all time that absolutely made me fall in love with Barcelona was L'Auberge Espagnole, which is the story of a young French student who is going on the European sort of gap year, but really you study in the Erasmus program. So the Erasmus program is a part of the Bologna Pact of schools. So all of the sort of public institutions, such as Ramon Llull, which is the big Barcelona school where people do exchange, are mostly European Union students, and they are essentially doing it on EU dollars. But they're doing a cultural exchange, and they're doing it for a full year, and they're living in a foreign city, they're living a foreign language, learning a foreign language, and living a pretty beautiful, enchanting life with all sorts of exoticism. And so L'Auberge Espagnole was absolutely one of the reasons why I moved to Barcelona, and I recommend watching that if you are planning to visit Barcelona for the first time.
Agreed. One of the first movies we watched after we got to Barcelona was Vicky Christina Barcelona, during which one of the characters gets married after I think the narrator says like 3 weeks, and Jim and I watched that scene and just died laughing because we were just getting the process started. It took us 6 months living in the country to get married in the country.
Oh, so I wanted to write Woody Allen. I was not.
He has issues with Woody Allen far beyond the. Yeah, but no, that's. I love all of that so much because it touches on exactly the value system that we have at Trippy, because we're always talking about, humanity and getting people to engage not only in their own humanity, but recognizing the humanity in others and how we're all humans. We all have the same desires and intentions, right, in life and needs and wants. And having that understanding of this culture, you mentioned that about language, that you mentioned a lot of things that I'm like, oh man, but like the thing about the language in particular that I love was pointing out that learning Catalan is not a necessity for going to Barcelona and really ingratiating yourself. Like, I didn't speak Catalan the entire time I lived there. I tried learning a little bit. The point that I'm trying to make is knowing Spanish, going there and speaking Spanish was not the end of the world. Trying to speak Catalan was what made the difference. Trying to engage those words and phrases and learning the culture, learning and appreciating the food first and foremost. Yeah. Like, if you don't appreciate Catalan food, you're done. Like, you're not going to survive and have a good experience. True. And there's plenty of American style restaurants and French style restaurants, right? And Italian eateries and things that you can go. I mean, there's just such a diversity of everything in Barcelona. But if you can't bring yourself to eat, like blood pudding or, jamon serrano or just like.
Oh, the morcilla, the blood sausage was hard for me.
That's tough. No, I'm with you on that
We
one.
definitely struggled with it, but we tried it, right? Like, that was the point. And they were like, hey, you gave it a shot. We don't even like it. You're good. I had somebody actually say that to me, and I was like, oh, thank God. But that's fine. You don't learn that stuff unless you and I'm not saying this to people who are obviously like vegetarian or something. There's obviously a lot of stuff that you can eat there that's not meat-based. As I'm trying to say is you mentioned that about learning the culture and getting into the culture. You don't have to have the language, so there's no intimidation necessary around that. It's just being free of mind to do this thing while you're there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think food is absolutely a great gateway and conduit into that culture. Catalans are used to hearing, the Sagrada Familia,
which is the big church. Everyone always said, oh, there's that big church. I'm like, Sagrada Familia is the name of the church.
Right. Or, you can hear, general tourists just gasping at things like, the architecture of Gaudí.
Oh, yeah.
But when you compliment them on, their food, that runs deeper.
It does.
And it does. And I would say that if you're visiting Catalunya for the first time, things you cannot miss. Number one, fideuà, which is the Catalan specific version of paella. Paella was actually born right next door in Valencia, a couple hours south on the train. A paella from Valencia is very specific. It is, usually thinner and richer in the sauce and in the rice than Americans have awareness of. But when you go into Catalunya, into Barcelona, they do a very similar dish, but made with sort of little short, thin noodles that they refer to as fideos. And it's done in a large pan, just as a paella would be done. But when you sort of finish the product, what is known as the socorrat, which normally is the crusty kind of bits that, sort of the
bottom of the bowl,
bottom of the edge of the pan, the crispy bits that would normally be with the rice is actually with the noodles. And it's really a spectacular dish. And it's served with usually a handmade by a grandmother alioli, which is that aioli is the Catalan version of aioli, as we all know it in America. But, it's the same concept. In Italy, they call it aioli. In Catalunya, it's ailioli. And it's olive oil and eggs that are just slowly hand done until it is a garlic cream mayonnaise type thing that you is it not making your mouth water?
I mean, I had a turkey sandwich for lunch. It's not getting me through.
Yeah, it's not a fideuà, that's for sure.
No.
but yeah, the fideuà is definitely one of the things I would suggest trying. I know a lot of people love as well any version of a croqueta, which are
my God, yes.
Which are
It's gonna be the American favorite, just for the fact that it's breaded and deep fried. Come on, you're not gonna lose out.
Yeah, and beware if you are a vegan or vegetarian, because most of those, even if they say, "Oh yeah, they're vegan friendly," usually they do have bits of ham in them. So, just be sure to double, triple ask. I would also say that, Catalan cuisine that is unique to Catalunya, so many things, but also so many things are also Spanish. So they call it crema catalana.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if it's pretty much the same thing. I know you guys know the
the caramel custard or flan.
Right.
It's very similar. I would say it's similar to flan, not the same, because it's seasoned. It's spiced a little differently. So they do, and it is a different consistency, where flan tends to be a little more almost gelatinous. Crema catalana tends to be a little more like a pudding. It's a bit like thicker in that way. So
I was going to say, I remember it being kind of like creme brulee.
Yeah. It's a lot more like that.
It's served in a pot, isn't it?
It is.
Am I remembering that right?
I want to say they add a little more like of a cinnamon flavor to it, whereas creme brulee tends to have more of a vanilla forward. And it's not, I don't remember it being as sweet, or I remember it being sweeter. I don't remember which. I remember the sweetness being different.
I think in Catalunya, it is very much like a creme brulee. And so they are only, a few hours south of the French border. So there's always a contested, heated argument over who founded, is it crema catalana or is it creme brulee? But the concept is the same. I mean, it is sort of a flan-like, texture underneath, a custard that has some cinnamon in it and some vanilla flavors. But then on top, it has that, seared with sugar. With sugar. So it creates that, nice crack in the top. So definitely, I mean, the crema catalana is something that the Catalans consider their own, and you should definitely try it.
Yes.
And something I think this time of year in particular that I do believe is Catalan, now do correct me if I'm wrong, and is also vegan. I do know this much. Calçotada.
Yes, calçots. Yes.
So calçotada is the serving of them, but describe this. I love telling people about this because they're like, wait, what do you do? And it just like blows everyone's mind. But you do your explanation of it. I want to see if we're like similar.
This will harken back to, I suppose, a little bit of that. How medieval are these people that they have a festival? They have a festival every year for eating onions. But they're larger, sort of a version, I would say, of a leek meets a large sort of spring onion, or
they're huge. I mean, they're the size of like your forearm. They're absolutely massive.
They are big, and they are actually more in season a little bit later in the year. So I would say like from December through March.
Okay. Okay.
Is the season for the calçotada, and the calçots, or the onions, are essentially harvested, cleaned, and then they're thrown in large quantities over like an oven grill with firewood.
Yeah.
So they're typically done out at the old, centuries old macias,
Mhm.
or the old sort of country residences, which are typically not, they don't have electricity. So the only form of heating the old macias, the only form of light is truly, gas, oil, and fire. And so the tradition I would say January, February is typically when we would go out in groups to a macia. We would take a hike, and then we would earn your meal. You would get down to the macia, and it would be this gorgeous stone building that has, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of history. And you're sitting at an open, long table, and they bring out these charred, long, green onions, and they give you a bib, and they give you these mitts.
Oh, you got mitts for yours. Lucky you.
Oh yeah. Well, then you take, the crust, the sort of charred bits off of the calçot, and you remove them entirely. And then you take the tender greens of the calçot and you dip it in a romesco sauce, which, although it does look like it would be a tomato paste based item, it's actually made with red peppers, roasted red peppers, and garlic, and olive oil, and crushed almonds. And so you dip it in that romesco sauce, and then you eat it from up above. That's a requirement as well. So then you're eating these calçots. Typically, they're also served with some sort of grilled protein, but the calçots are sort of the reason for the season is to go out and celebrate that, and to drink a bunch of wine, copious amounts of wine.
Oh, absolutely. Standard.
And out of the the big glass jar that has the spout, where you try to hold it away from your face as far as possible. Sip it. That's it. That's it. And of course, that's also messy and fun, and people always get a big kick out of that. So I also would suggest a calçotada. That's a great suggestion. So
I love these things. We have a probably still. I have to imagine he's still there. We can talk a little bit about Montserrat. I didn't even bring it up in the questions, but about a 90-minute train ride outside of Spain is Montserrat, and the Basilica of Montserrat, which has a Black Madonna statue, which is a big pilgrimage for a lot of Catholics. We went there just regularly because it was just so beautiful, and it's right outside town.
Oh, it's so gorgeous.
And all these people come, and they set up, there's a market along the street leading up to the Basilica. And so people come and they sell their wares. So all the tourists who come buy the food and things, because you can picnic on the mountain. We had a cheesemonger there by the name of Ippolito, and Poli, as we called him. And so that was his favorite thing, was he would serve us slices of cheese and then give it to Ryan, and then he would, for himself, and we would toast and get drunk and eat cheese on the side of the mountain, and it was amazing.
I think he spoke like a little bit of English and Catalan too.
Exclusively.
I don't think he did
not speak Spanish.
I don't think he spoke Spanish. Yeah,
and he was incredible. He's one of my favorite people on this planet of Earth, and I will tell you, we left Spain in 2011 and we went back in 2017 for, my dad was walking the Camino de Santiago as a retirement gift to himself. And so we got him started on the side of Montserrat, and we introduced him to Poli, and he was still there, and he remembered us, and
it's like we were all friends. It was crazy.
My
it was so
my
fun.
friends, my brother, like he took to Jim. I mean, these two were like just big bears together on the side of the mountain. It was
that's adorable.
It was wonderful.
Yeah, and that's the kind of like connection that you can make with Catalans. It's like, they want to feed you, and they want to celebrate the culture, and
it's not a city you go to lose weight.
Well, I did. I don't know. I mean, I walked everywhere, and and hiked everywhere, and you mentioned Montserrat. Montserrat is absolutely one of the most beautiful mountains that I've ever witnessed, and you're right. I mean, it's breathtaking.
I think it's technically I'm a rock hound from way back, and I think it's technically a geologic anomaly. So it's the rock formation of Montserrat itself is unlike no other rock formation in the entire area, in that whole section of the country. Like these rocks don't exist anywhere else.
So they're I mean, they're really beautiful from afar, because it does sort of look like they sort of jet straight up out of nowhere. And so you see all these sort of white bald rocks,
Yeah.
scattered amongst the greenery in the background. And you mentioned, yes, the top of the mountain does have a church, with a boys choir that sings, and
Mhm.
there is what they call the Black Virgin. It's a Virgin Mary that is made out of mahogany. Just the wood that was used to carve her is a black wood. But a lot of girls in Catalunya's name is Montse because of
Mhm.
Hmm.
Montserrat. So you'll find a lot of Montses when you're in Catalunya, and you can say, como la montaña, and they'll be like, yes, and they'll be
Exactly.
very pleased that you know that.
Yeah. I'm
And the
not
turron thing, I mean, my God,
oh god.
eating cheese and, drinking, wine out of a spout held.
I never did it. I never did it right. I every time just straight down my front. I'm not
Can't take her anywhere.
no, no, not inaccurate. So to your point, like we could go on about
Mm.
Catalan culture for
Mhm,
days. I mean, there's just so much to appreciate about it. And I think it's
mhm,
nice that we're having this conversation because Barcelona is such an intentional destination for so many people around the world, as it should be. It's a very hyper unique space with hyper unique people and culture. It's got a lot of things that you never I mean, there were things that I'm sure you were still experiencing because I know we were after a year, we were like, "What?" Like, it catches you off guard in so many ways. I'm really curious as far as, like, what were some of your personal most and least favorite? Like, I wanted to do this in, like, a two-part, like, what were your least favorite parts of Barcelona? And then talk about, like, your most favorite parts of Barcelona, because I feel like everyone has kind of the similar least favorite parts, but I'm curious what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, bureaucracy in, just sort of getting anything done paperwork wise
Mm,
is a struggle, but you're going to find that in a lot of European countries. Some countries are better at process than others, but you need to be prepared to be patient
mm,
with
Yes.
paperwork.
yeah.
You go to the ayuntamiento, which is, the government, to process any paperwork, and, you have to sort of sit in line or stand in line, and then you get to the front and somebody tells you, "Oh, you're in the wrong line. You need to go in another line." It's like the DMV on steroids. It's that.
Can confirm.
But it's not that they don't want to help you. Like, point of clarification, when with our experience, like, we definitely got the sense that people wanted us to succeed with our paperwork. They just were hamstrung in doing so because we were in such a unique situation, i.e., trying to get married so that he could stay essentially on my student visa. Yes, we got married for papers, but that's, but but the whole idea of
Every
like
Worked out.
once we got the opportunity, once everything was in order and we were able to do the thing, man, they couldn't be happier to like sign off and like make it happen and do the thing.
Mhm.
So it's not a lack of desire. It's more just to your point, the red tape is just insane.
Yeah, and I think, the bureaucracy is to be expected. It is
Mm.
an old European place with lots of structure. I mean, I think you would find that in France as well. The aristocracy was built upon many layers of leadership, and
Mhm.
then but spread out wide with, administrative stuff.
Mhm.
So, that's to be expected. That was my least favorite part, but, it's also an interesting part of
Mhm.
understanding how our governments are different and how they're structured differently, and
Mhm.
they have a parliament, and they look towards America for, sort of ideas and on how to innovate and how to, succeed in business, but their government structures are definitely influenced by
Mhm.
Western Europe and the UK.
Mhm.
So that would be the least favorite.
I feel like kind of the Spanish attitude, just generally speaking, is more laid back than you'd find, at least here in the States.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, yeah, we'll get it done. I promise.
It's gonna happen.
It'll get there. It'll get there. Just takes its time. To your
Yep.
point, learn some patience. Understand that it's not going to get done tomorrow, but it will get done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as Americans, that is one thing that we struggle with. And
Mhm.
someone had said this to me years ago, and I thought it was such a perfect phrase for describing American versus Chinese culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've said it even on the podcast before, but it's Americans waste everything but time. Chinese people waste nothing but time. So it was fascinating because it's like, yeah, that's how Spain felt to me. Like nothing gets wasted.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even that time is necessarily wasted. It's just in our minds because we're raised with the concept of time is money. And we don't realize that that's not a global
Mhm.
mindset. It's a very American way of living. But I am curious, what did you think about security? Like, what was your right? Because everyone talks about the pickpockets in Barcelona as tourists, in areas, and I wouldn't say that we were in all the touristy areas all the time, but generally speaking, like, what were your experiences?
Knock on wood, I was very lucky.
Mm.
In the 8 years that I lived there, I was never pickpocketed. I was never, I didn't even have an attempt. I think partially that is, I took great efforts to dress the part, look the part, act the part of a local. And
Mhm.
what I noticed is that the locals were vigilant.
Mhm.
They were vigilant about their belongings and where they were, and they felt that they were a part of a community where you just follow their lead. You carry a crossbody bag on the metro, and
Right.
you hold your hand on the edge of it, and you
Mhm.
keep it in front of your body and close to you. You don't have all of your passport and money and values in a backpack where you can't see what's happening behind you.
Mhm.
And you try to be aware of your surroundings and to sort of not put yourself in a situation where you look like a target. And
Mhm.
Yeah.
again, back to Vicky Christina Barcelona, more than one beef that I have as well with that movie is you see Scarlett Johansson walking with a backpack. Her eyes are just sort of wide-eyed, and she's looking at all the architecture of La Rambla, and it's like, whoa, man, she'd be a
No.
target for sure. So
Yeah.
I mean, the pickpocket thing, I think it's really just about being aware of your surroundings. And also the pickpockets are clever. Just leave your passport in a lockbox in the hotel, or, have it on you on your body, very close to, a
Mhm.
place that you would recognize if somebody was touching it, AKA
Yeah.
your
Right.
private parts.
Right.
Because if you have to carry your passport with you, that would be the smartest way to do it. If you don't want to spend a bunch of time on your vacation bureaucratically trying to file a police report and get a new passport or a temporary passport to get back home or out of the country.
Which I unfortunately had to file a police report, not for myself, but for a friend who had her wallet stolen. And yeah, that was, oh my God. That was a multi-day visit to the police station.
Yeah, and but the pickpockets are clever. So if they get away with some cash, let it be. If they steal your camera or a cell phone, move on. Don't
Mhm.
waste too much energy being upset about it.
Mhm.
Like I said, they're really clever. There's a trick now that's been done for the last 5 or 10 years. I'm sure that they've advanced beyond that, but not since I last went in June, where somebody from an upper balcony might spill a little something,
Mm.
water or coffee, onto you, and another person would come around and look very concerned. And of course, if you're a foreign tourist and you don't speak the language, and somebody comes up to you
Mhm.
sort of speaking something and dabbing at you with a handkerchief, saying
Mhm.
in broken English, "Oh, you do have something on you," like, you're going to think that they're just being a kind person. Well, actually, it's
Yeah.
a system to distract you. It's a magic trick. So just keep your eyes open.
It's a good rule to follow, generally speaking. Don't let people touch you. Like, I know that sounds kind of obvious, but it's hard. Anyone who's from a dense city is gonna know that that's impossible. But what I'm saying is letting people run into you, letting people come up and put their hands on you. I had a guy one time come up to Jim while we were walking home from the bar, stumbling home from the bar, and he was trying to put his arm around, "Oh, my friend, my buddy." And I pushed him off and I said, "Do not touch him.
Yeah.
Do not touch him." And he wasn't Catalan. I think he
Oh,
was Eastern European or something.
I
But it
had
was just
somebody
like,
try and do the bump and run
yeah,
on the beach once, and I was like, I
you
don't
just
know you, dude.
sidestep him. Like,
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, just making sure that, like, if you are out and intoxicated in Barcelona, which is very easy to do because
Yeah.
everyone is serving you wine and it's cheap and it's plentiful. Just, if you feel like you look like a mark,
Mm,
get in a taxi and get
Mm.
someplace else. And, taxis are cheap and plentiful.
mhm.
Also, public transport is some
Mm.
of the cleanest and the most reliable that I've
It's
ever.
amazing. I've never seen anything like
And there
it.
was so much of it for such a small
Oh my
area-wise
God.
city,
They have what? They had 10 lines when we were there.
at least, yeah,
10 lines. And it's a quarter the size of Philadelphia,
area-wise,
where we have
yeah.
2 lines here. Like,
My favorite part, you asked me what my favorite part is, and I mean, this is kind of a nerdy favorite part, but I mean, I loved, they had a countdown clock. So there were 2 minutes and 30 seconds between each train. you could very easily in Barcelona never own a car, which I did not for 8 years.
Yeah.
And not only properly circumnavigate the city, but you could get out of the city and go to many, many other gorgeous places very quickly and very easily and very cheaply.
Yeah.
So we're talking, you could get down to Tarragona if you wanted to on a train. You could get up to any of the beach towns between essentially Barcelona and most of Costa Brava even. And,
I mean, all within 2 hours, easy.
so typically the hot spots that you want to hit are Sitges, being a train ride away, Tarragona being a train ride away.
I just have to point out, Sitges for our LGBT plus community is a phenomenal place. It has one of the best pride celebrations on this planet of Earth, but tons of clubs, and it's really kind of a gay mecca in a lot of ways. That's how it's referred to by a lot of people, and it just is. It's so freeing and lovely to be in a place like that. But sorry, any more places?
No, absolutely.
No.
I completely agree. Sitges has, like you said, a great LGBTQI community, and they have Carnival every year, which is lots of fun, lots of dress up, lots
Amazing.
of dancing, lots of drinking, and, enjoying life. So, highly recommended. But public transport, number one is my favorite thing about Barcelona. Just the infrastructure is so well done, and also, proves a point when, you go to large cities or big bustling cities in the United States, and they, say, oh, well, we can't do this because, the town was built in different eras. Well, I mean, come on. Catalunya was built by the Visigoths in certain neighborhoods, and they've been able to create infrastructure, buses, trains, bikes. There's a funicular, so much. It's great.
The biking is safe. Like, that's the other thing, is the biking is safe. The infrastructure is insane, but the biking feels safe. Like Bising, when we were living there, and Bising was for residents only while we were there. I don't know if that's still the case or if they have like a tourist version of that's available, but the bike lanes were trustworthy. That's something that blew my mind about, like, living here in Philly. They've put up all these bike lanes and they're great, but they're not trustworthy. Like, they end in some places. They don't account for the traffic situation. Like, they haven't made it safe for the cyclists, where they're like the
There could have
primary
been
focus.
more planning going into them.
Right. Whereas in Barcelona, it's like you feel like riding the bike down the bike path. You're not going to get hit by someone. It's just kind of like, yeah, I feel like I can get around this city. And again, it's small. People don't realize what a small space this is for as much transportation as available.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the beauty of international travel, is that you're given a moment to sort of reflect on what you perceive as better or worse, or sort of the good, the bad, the ugly of a culture in comparison or in reference to the way that you grew up, or in the way that you know things to be, and the truth that you understand is correct.
Yeah.
And it gives you a moment to reflect upon that and say, what do I have to learn from this culture? And I would say that, not only is Barcelona and Catalunya really an advanced European city when it comes to transportation, but they have a lot more to offer than that doesn't always meet the eye. I think that one thing why people gravitate towards Spain and why they gravitate towards the Iberian Peninsula and then to Catalunya is this sense of, we can enjoy life. We can be out, and we should be out and about. We should enjoy the sun. We should sit at a cafe. We should enjoy each other's conversation. We should enjoy the food. We should take vacation. We should take time to be a part of our community and be a part of our families. And they are vehemently protective of that cultural nuance. And I would say your question was, what is my favorite? And I gave, kind of a technical answer about the transport, but the true answer is community and the sense of protection that they have over their lifestyle. And it's cafe culture and community and protecting the downtime that they have. And as an American, I still struggle being back, wanting to recreate that community and recreate that protection of my energy, and the community and the culture where I'm living. Right now, it's the Mission in San Francisco. But
but I mean, that's what's
Good
so great about
points.
it, is like you're mentioning, struggling with finding that space when you come back. I think, it's also kind of a struggle when you go to a place like that. As Americans, it's hard for us to turn it off. It's hard for us to let it go and unwind and actually take permission to do that. So when you're just sort of immersed in it, it encourages all of that. which kind of actually leads into a question I wanted to ask you around preparation. What, our big focus is travel planning.
Mhm.
What kind of planning did you have to do to get over there?
Oh man. So I mean, I knew that I wanted to live and work abroad,
Mm,
and that was the end goal, was to not only visit Spain,
mhm.
and live in Catalunya and Barcelona, but it was to find a job and get my visa sponsored and stay.
There you go.
And that did take a lot of prep. The portion about deciding where I wanted to be in the Iberian Peninsula was the first step, which was, do I want to be in Madrid? Do I want to be in
Mm,
Barcelona? Do I want to be in Sevilla, Granada,
Mhm.
Alicante,
yeah.
Valencia? Those were my first thoughts. But, Portugal wasn't out of the picture either. Lisboa,
Mm,
Porto, beautiful places, beautiful options. Of course, I would have had to have done a deeper dive on the Portuguese that I spoke at the time. I thought I could and should be employable with the skill set that I have, a college degree, a background in, business and sales, and, even an understanding of Latin America, should there be, interest in developing, relationships there.
yeah.
And so I kind of narrowed down why I wanted to live in Barcelona versus Madrid. I mean, Madrid is known as sort of the business capital
Yeah.
of
Mhm.
Spain, but quite frankly, I was fascinated with Barcelona's dedication towards design and
Mm.
its innovation in
Mm,
comparison to Madrid. And I thought I would culturally be a better fit for Barcelona. So I kind of took Madrid off the list and
mhm.
started focusing on Barcelona. And then I did a lot of a who's who in the world of my network. Now, I know not all of us have had an opportunity to be in a college setting with a lot of international students or weren't involved in that, but I was. Of course, I mentioned having lived in Mexico prior to university. So by the time I got to my college education, I was very much involved with International Student
Yeah.
Association, and I had connections all over the world. And I reached out to them wherever they landed. Some of those folks were coming from Latin America or from Western Europe or from Asia, and they had either ended up working in the United States
Mhm.
or they had ended up, going back to their home countries. And I just, sort of reestablished those relationships and asked them what they were doing, how they were doing, what their families were based, where they were based, what they were doing, professionally, and if they had any advice or introductions that they could make for me in Spain. And surprisingly, there were a lot of introductions that were made through
Amazing.
that, which gave me a leg up in my career search when I got to Barcelona.
And this predates really like LinkedIn being what it is now. I think maybe I don't even know if LinkedIn was fully a thing yet or if it was still just like kind of in its nascency. Networking today is virtually especially is so much different than it was when we were in Spain.
For sure. I mean, it was a lot of actual personal outreach
Mhm.
and, setting up a phone call, sending an email, and, really catching up on all levels. It even involved me taking a couple of trips.
Oh, wow.
I flew to Washington, D.C., and met up with a couple of friends of mine who, post university, ended up working at the World Bank or working in international development and politics on behalf of, their countries. I went to Los Angeles and met a couple of friends. I went to Miami and met a couple of friends just to say, hey, what have you been up to? And I'm thinking about moving to Spain. I'm thinking about moving to Barcelona. Who
Mm,
do you know? What do you know about that market? And that process took about a year.
Mm.
So I had a lot of planning
mm,
before I left.
yeah.
And, I also made peace with whatever outcome was going to happen. I said to myself, okay, you are going to land in the European Union in Barcelona and you will have 3 months, 90 days of a tourist visa.
Yep.
Within that time, if you budget properly, you live in youth hostels and you interview in your first few months a lot, you may get a sponsorship and you may not. You may end up, coming home with your tail between your legs saying, I failed, but at least you tried.
Yes.
And that was a big motivator for me, was to say, okay, well, I'm going to give this a go. And at that point, I gave myself the permission to enjoy planning those 3 months at the very least.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so I did. I stayed at a youth hostel in the current neighborhood of Poble Sec. on the street Poeta Cabañes, which is right next to a very famous tapas place called Kimeti Kimet.
That's
And
amazing.
I was living in a youth hostel, one of those 10-room bunk bed situations with lockers and shared bathrooms. And I would get up at 8 a.m. and I would take the public bus and go up to various places in the city and interview. I
Yeah.
wore suits and I
Yeah.
showed up early, and people thought that was unique uh, for a young person, that I wasn't sort of, I don't know, entitled with, this is just my gap year, or, I'm just going to
Right.
blow all my parents' money or whatever. I think
Yeah.
because I was so dedicated to this goal, people did take me seriously in the
Yeah.
interview process. But I also made time. On the weekends, I would go visit all the things that I wanted to see, which ranged from Girona and, some historic stuff and museums, to taking, weekend trips and going to Mallorca
Oh,
and,
wow.
just really diving in and saying, if this ends up being my only 90-day window in this
Yeah.
country, I will take full advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like it sounds like that set you up really well. I mean, obviously you accomplished your goal, and it's interesting that you say, like, I failed. And I know there's this sense that we have, especially as Americans, that we're saying like, oh, when you don't accomplish the thing that you set out to do, that is failure, as opposed to failure being part of that success, right? Like if you had come home after that 90 days and it hadn't worked out, then of course it would have been the next step in your journey to like do the thing. But because you were able to stay, it sounds like being able to do all those things and see all these things that you wanted to do put you in a place where, hey, now you're really intimately familiar with the area. And I can imagine that helped you enjoy it more. Being there made you better at your job, getting ingratiated with the locals, like all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, people who are in their, I don't know, late 30s or early 40s are still sort of dealing with that parental pressure of, like, when we were in our 20s, it was like, you get a job, you feed yourself, you get yourself out of your parents' house.
Mhm.
That's success. And you are an independent soul after that. And as an American, if you're not doing all the things all the time, you're probably not succeeding. But honestly, in hindsight, I think that I guess younger generations are doing it better, because they're saying everything is a fail forward. Everything is a iteration on innovating and finding your right place in the world and in society. And I think that I will never regret having taken a big chance on living abroad and doing what I wanted to do. And I hope I can repeat at some point in my life and expatriate again to a place where I am as intellectually and emotionally just curious and turned on by all of what is around me. I was, truly lit up by the cultural differences, the language differences,
Mm.
the capacity for interacting with a city in a different way. And I hope to experience that again.
I'm beaming just hearing you talking about this. It's such a cool.
Yeah.
I love that. Like that's the whole reason we travel. That's the whole reason people get out or should be the reason people get out in the world, is so that you can glow, so that you can like live up to your own emotional and mental potential in life and be like, oh, this is where I'm thriving all of a sudden. This is like making all the sense to me. And even if you take it back to where you're from, you don't have to live there to do it, but having that experience and coming back into your life and being like, oh yeah, okay, there's a whole new way to think about things. I love this.
Yeah.
And, I don't think anyone has to be an expat really to make that happen. I think that, as long as you're traveling, you're learning. And before I had this position, I was still living in San Francisco, but I was working for the University of Chicago, the Booth School of Business, and my territory was the West Coast and Latin America. And I felt extremely lucky that I was, traveling within Latin America to places that I, had never been, understood anecdotally, understood through the lens of Latino friends of mine, but was for the first time getting to set foot, in these countries and work and use my Spanish and interact and learn. And, that role carried me to Santiago de Chile, to several places in Brazil. I was in Mexico City often, Argentina. I truly felt like with each opportunity to travel, like I was growing immensely and way more than I would in my daily sort of tasks here in the United States. That identity still runs with me today, but I think that there was a level setting as well post pandemic, that I was realizing that travel is still a passion, but I can't do it every week. And I need to have more of a sense of community in my local San Francisco, because that is also what satiated and made me so happy when I was living in Catalunya, is that
Yeah.
I had community.
Yeah.
So
Because that is, I mean, that is anywhere you go. Like if you don't have that sense of community, it does negatively impact that space that you're in. I think that's a great theme to incorporate into this whole conversation, has really been like, how do you immerse yourself in a culture? How do you find your community everywhere that you go? How do you become someone who's able to find yourself through others or through your relationship, or you know what I mean? Like just having that sense of that global connection and that humanistic connection anywhere you go.
yeah, well, I mean, I think it's probably evident from my flair for my penchant for the dramatic, but one of my other passions is theater and acting, and I found that was really helpful in that sort of cultural camouflage. Is your curiosity is helpful, the capacity for you to witness a culture and to want to mimic it in any way, by mimicking the clothing that they wear, the sort of turns of phrase, the speech, the way that they interact. I mean, I fully set out to integrate as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, listen, if I dress like a Catalan, I speak like a Catalan, I move in and live like a Catalan, and I interact with the city the way that the Catalans do, I will find my place here. And that's exactly what happened. And I think that anyone can apply that philosophy to visiting or living abroad for however long, whether that's 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years. The capacity for mimicry is a powerful tool in your toolkit. And it's an honor for a lot of people to see that out of, a tourist.
Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. I mean, and the flip side of that, which I think a lot of people would do well to remember, especially people who are trying to find their influential ways on social media, pointing and gawking and laughing and pointing out pieces of something that you don't like or that you don't appreciate,
or that are just different from
or
your
that are just
experience.
different. I think immediately the Spanish Christmas time tradition of the caganer, but things like that you're looking at with like maybe an eyebrow raise is fine, but to point and laugh and gawk or think that people are some kind of way. I've encountered plenty of people who think that there are other cultures that are just to use their own words, they say stupid. These decisions that they make are stupid, or these things that they do are stupid. Making that kind of judgment call is not A, yours to make, and B, it doesn't explain why this decision making. This may have come out of thousands of years of land management and maybe experience with famine or other like natural disasters or natural disaster preparation, or right, like just cultural history that you don't have permission to judge, because this isn't something you experienced and grew up with and understood from an inherent perspective. So I love that you're pointing out that getting in there and mimicking and learning about and being a part of this culture in that way is so great. And it helps you avoid that sort of tendency that we have. Right. Well, but just the tendency that we have to look at something and be like, well, that's dumb. Why are they doing it that way? I don't understand this. This is stupid. Like that whole thing, it's easy to do. I'm right. Like, I hate to say it, but I'm just as guilty of it as the next person. I'm not going to say that I've never felt that way about another culture before. But once I learn about why people behave the way that they do or make their decisions, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
wow, I feel dumb. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's totally fair to go to a culture and say, oh my God, they're eating mealworms for breakfast. That's bonkers to have that initial thought. But, we all have a responsibility as well as international travelers to be ambassadors. That ambassadorship includes, suspending the belief of your culture is right, to try and understand and try to learn, as you said. And the caganer, it does shock people. Like, it's a statue of, yes, a human shitting in the background of a large nativity scene. And So, if you're highly religious and, you're thinking, oh, God, that's an insult, or,
Mhm.
let's say you just don't have a sense of humor, or you don't think that anything scatological is funny, then maybe that's not your bag. But I mean, truly, there is history behind it, and it will depend on who you ask in Catalunya. But the general gist that I understand of the purpose of the caganer is that the Catalan culture was trying to find a way to, say, we're these sort of poor feudal people that are at the mercy of the Catholic kings.
Mhm.
And we are the peasant in the nativity scene shitting in the background. That's us. And so the Kaganer does have a cultural impact, and
Yeah.
people, it's one of many subtleties and nuances about Barcelona that once you get the joke, you
Mm,
feel like you're in on an inside secret. And
exactly.
that's how I would describe Barcelona in a nutshell, is just the best kept secret in the world.
That
Mm.
is the perfect place to leave this.
Yeah.
That could not have been said better. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, LeeAnn Mutchler, for joining us on this episode of Travel Buzz Podcast. We had an absolute blast talking with her, and we cannot wait to have her on again. Travel Buzz is available wherever you get your favorite podcast, but don't forget to check out our episodes on YouTube if you need visual confirmation that the people we talk to are real. If you like this conversation and want to learn more about Spain, please be sure to join us for next month's episode, where we interview Google Translate developer Edward Ayi about his now annual end-of-year trips to the Iberian Peninsula that all started with a whim of a question about what is Granada like at Christmas. Thank you as always to Blake Symphony for providing our theme music and undying support. He can be found on SoundCloud, Instagram, and other social media at the elegantly simple handle @BlakeSymphony. Thank you forever to my co-founder and main squeeze, Jim Manning. Let's keep having this adventure. And finally, thank you to you, our viewers and listeners, for your engagement and support. We couldn't be who we are without you. We'll see you next month.